This might be one of the internet's most misunderstood words. Hypergamy. It's everywhere. TikTok, YouTube, Hypergamy, podcasts. Some people say it explains modern dating. Others say it's nothing more than internet fiction. But here's the weird part. Almost every explanation starts on social media. The real story doesn't. I thought I'd find the answer buried somewhere online. I was wrong. Because this story doesn't begin with influencers, or dating apps, or even the internet itself. It begins more than 140 years ago. Like most people, I started where almost everyone learns about hypergamy today, social media. TikTok was overflowing with short videos claiming to explain modern dating in under a minute. YouTube had hours of debates. Reddit was packed with endless threads arguing over whether the idea was undeniable truth or complete nonsense. Podcasts dissected it from every possible angle, and every creator seemed completely certain they had the answer. The strange part was that while everyone was explaining what hypergamy supposedly meant, almost nobody explained where the word had actually come from. The deeper I searched, the more confusing things became. Every platform had a different definition, every community had its own interpretation, and every comment section seemed to be having a completely different conversation. So I stopped listening to opinions and started looking for the original source instead. That search pulled me away from viral clips and into libraries, research papers, historical records, and old dictionaries. That's where the first real surprise appeared. Hypergamy wasn't created to describe modern dating, and it certainly wasn't invented by YouTubers or TikTok creators. The earliest English record I could trace pointed somewhere completely unexpected, British India in 1881. At the time, Britain governed much of the Indian subcontinent, and administrators were documenting local customs rather than studying relationships in the modern sense. One of them was Sir Denzil Ibbotson. While recording marriage customs in Punjab, he used the term to describe a pattern in which women married into families of higher social status. The word itself comes from the Greek roots hyper, meaning above, and gamos, meaning marriage. Literally, it meant marrying up. What's fascinating is what happened next, or rather, what didn't happen. For decades, the term remained almost entirely inside sociology and anthropology. It appeared in books, research papers, and university libraries, but very few people outside academic circles had ever heard it. If you had asked someone on the street what hypergamy meant in the 1950s, they probably would have looked at you with a confused expression. The word simply wasn't part of everyday conversation. That changed with the internet. Suddenly, ideas that had spent decades hidden inside universities were only a search away. Hypergamy slowly started appearing in blogs, online forums, and relationship discussions. At first, it was still a niche topic. Most of the people discussing it were interested in sociology, human behavior, or relationship psychology. The conversations were usually long, detailed, and filled with references to books and academic articles. But as more people discovered the term, something unexpected started happening. The word began traveling much faster than its original context. People weren't just discussing the research anymore. They were interpreting it. Some focused on history. Others focused on biology. Others connected it to modern dating culture. The more the conversation spread, the more the meaning expanded. Hypergamy gradually stopped being just one concept and became a collection of different ideas sharing the same name. By the early 2010s, the word had found a completely different audience. This time, it wasn't professors or researchers leading the discussion. It was online communities focused on dating, relationships, and gender dynamics. Among them were communities often grouped under the label of the manosphere, including red pill forums. These communities didn't invent the word, but they helped introduce it to a much larger online audience. Hypergamy became one of the central concepts used to explain their views on modern relationships. Long forum posts broke down dating experiences. Blog articles tried connecting personal observations with evolutionary psychology. YouTube creators turned those discussions into videos that reached hundreds of thousands of viewers. As more creators entered the conversation, the interpretations multiplied. One creator would argue that hypergamy explained changing relationship dynamics. Another would criticize that interpretation entirely. Someone else would build on it, adding new ideas that weren't part of the original academic definition. Reaction videos appeared. Debate channels responded. Podcast hosts invited guests to argue for hours. Every week there seemed to be another explanation, another theory, another viral discussion. Hypergamy was no longer an obscure social science term. It had become one of the internet's favorite relationship topics. Then short-form content changed everything. Instead of hour-long discussions, people were learning about hypergamy through videos that lasted less than a minute. A topic that researchers had debated across decades was suddenly being summarized in 30 seconds. Street interviews were clipped into bite-sized arguments. Podcast discussions were reduced to a single quote. One sentence became a headline. The goal was no longer to explain the subject completely. It was to make people stop scrolling. The result was predictable. Every creator emphasized different parts of the story. Some argued that hypergamy explained nearly every relationship. Others insisted it had become nothing more than a buzzword. Some relied on academic papers. Others relied on personal experiences. Many mixed the two together without making a clear distinction. Viewers jumped from one video to another, often hearing completely different definitions without realizing it. The same word was being used to describe historical marriage customs, evolutionary theories, modern dating trends, and individual experiences, all at the same time. That's when hypergamy stopped being just an academic term. It became an internet meme. Not necessarily a joke, but an idea that spread far beyond its original meaning. People started attaching the word to celebrity breakups, dating app screenshots, street interviews, podcast clips, and even completely unrelated relationship stories. If someone dated a wealthier partner, comments filled with the word hypergamy. If a viral interview featured someone talking about dating standards, the comments mention hypergamy again. Eventually, the word became shorthand for almost any conversation about relationships, even when it didn't accurately describe what was happening. The strange part is that this transformation happened so gradually that almost nobody noticed it. There wasn't a single creator who changed the meaning. It happened piece by piece. One interpretation inspired another. One clip inspired hundreds more. Each creator emphasized different details, and with every retelling the original context became a little harder to see. By the time millions of people had heard the word, many had never encountered the academic definition at all. They had only encountered the internet's version of it. And that's where one of the biggest misunderstandings begins. If you ask 10 different creators what hypergamy means, there's a good chance you'll hear 10 different answers. Some are describing sociology. Some are describing evolutionary psychology. Some are describing online dating. Some are describing their own personal experiences. They're all using the same word, but they aren't always talking about the same idea. That's one of the main reasons debates around hypergamy often go nowhere. Before anyone can agree or disagree, they're often arguing over completely different definitions. So after tracing the history of the word from British India to modern TikTok, one question remained. How much of what people say online is actually supported by research? And how much has simply been repeated so many times that it feels true? To answer that, we have to leave social media behind once again and return to the academic literature, because this is where the internet story and the research begin to separate. To understand that, it's important to separate two very different things that are often treated as if they're the same. The first is the academic concept of hypergamy. The second is the internet's interpretation of it. Those two ideas overlap in some places, but they are not identical. If you open a sociology textbook, you'll find that hypergamy is simply a descriptive term. It describes a pattern that has appeared in certain societies and historical periods where people married into a higher social or economic group. It was never presented as a universal law that explained every relationship. It was one concept among many that researchers used to study how societies worked. Over the years, researchers expanded that discussion. Some focused on education. Others looked at income. Some studied changing gender roles. Others explored how modernization affected marriage patterns. There wasn't one single explanation because human relationships are influenced by many different factors. At the same time, evolutionary psychologists explored a different question. Instead of looking at history or social class, they asked whether humans evolved certain mate preferences over thousands of years. Some studies suggested that, on average, women place greater importance on a partner's ability to provide resources and long-term stability, while men, on average, placed greater importance on other traits. These findings became widely discussed, but they also came with important limitations. Average differences don't describe every individual, and they don't predict every relationship. That's where the internet often skipped a few steps. Instead of saying, some studies found average tendencies under certain conditions, videos began saying, this is how all women think. Instead of discussing historical marriage patterns, creators started using hypergamy as a universal explanation for modern dating. Instead of separating evidence from opinion, the two were blended together until they became almost impossible to tell apart. That doesn't mean every creator was intentionally misleading people. Many genuinely believed they were explaining the research. Others were sharing personal experiences. Some were trying to start conversations. The problem was that once thousands of creators repeated slightly different versions of the same idea, those differences started disappearing. The result was something researchers sometimes call concept drift. A word keeps the same name, but its meaning slowly changes as more people use it in different ways. By the time the word reaches millions of people, it may mean something very different from what it originally described. Hypergamy isn't the only example of this. Words like alpha, gaslighting, narcissist, and even trauma have all experienced similar shifts online. Academic terms often become simplified, stretched beyond their original definitions, or used in completely different contexts once they become part of internet culture. Hypergamy followed that same path. Today, if you search the word online, you'll probably find thousands of videos confidently explaining what it means. Some will reference sociology. Others will reference evolutionary psychology. Others will base their entire argument on dating app screenshots or celebrity relationships. Some will contradict each other completely while using the exact same word. That doesn't necessarily make every video wrong, but it does make one thing very clear. The conversation is no longer just about the original concept. It's about people's interpretations of that concept. And those interpretations are shaped by personal experiences, online communities, cultural differences, political beliefs, and the platforms where those conversations happen. By this point, the debate has become much bigger than the word itself. Ironically, the internet transformed a niche academic term into one of the most recognizable ideas in online dating culture. Millions of people have now heard the word hypergamy. Yet many have never encountered the historical context in which it first appeared, or the careful way researchers used it in academic writing. That doesn't mean the concept should be ignored, nor does it mean every internet discussion should be dismissed. It simply means that understanding a complicated subject requires more than a third-a-second clip. The story of hypergamy isn't really about proving one side right or the other wrong. It's about watching an idea evolve, a term that began in British India in the 1880s, spent decades inside academic journals, was rediscovered by online communities, popularized through blogs, forums, podcasts, and YouTube, then exploded across TikTok, until eventually it became something far larger than the original word itself. And maybe that's the real lesson here. The internet doesn't just spread ideas, it changes them. Every repost, every reaction, every debate, every meme adds another layer until the original meaning becomes harder and harder to recognize. So the next time you hear someone confidently explain hypergamy in 30 seconds, remember that the story behind that single word took more than 140 years to unfold. And if one academic term can change this much after passing through the internet, just imagine how many others already have. Thanks for watching.